Thank you very much indeed. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first session of the afternoon here in the Inspire stage. And I'm going to hand over to Owen Wills. Owen is representative of the Cardiff Capital Region and is the Innovation Manager there, the Senior Innovation Manager, and he will introduce you to your panel. But this is looking at place-based innovation. So Owen, I'm going to hand over to you, and I look forward to a fantastic panel. I've just seen who's on it. It is a great panel.
Prynawn da pawb. Croeso and welcome to our panel on enabling place-based innovation, driving local impact through collaboration. I work within the innovation team at Cardiff Capital Region, and quite simply, our role is to really create the conditions for the very best innovation-led growth that we possibly can within our region. And we are going to talk today between us, and to introduce the panel, first and foremost, these are three individuals that I highly respect. Three of the most committed individuals to place-based innovation. And what we will do is break down some questions for the panel. I will also invite you to challenge us and perhaps share your experiences as well. So first and foremost, I've got Kelly Byrne, who's the Chief Executive at Cardiff Capital Region. I have Louise Harris, Founder and Chief Executive at Tramshed Tech. Last but not least, I've got Rick Delbridge, Professor of Organisational Analysis, co-convener of the Centre of Innovation Policy and Research at Cardiff Business School. We're going to explore today really how regions unlock innovation that genuinely transforms communities. Coming from one of those valleys communities within the Cardiff Capital Region, there is that intrinsic motivation for me to see the difference in that community that I grew up in, not just across our urban centres within our region. I thought I would start by offering you perhaps some context before I come to the panel. I also wanted to share with you one of the tools that we have that I think you'll be interested in if you haven't come across it before. It's going to feature throughout our conversation, and it's the Local Innovation Partnership Fund. The Local Innovation Partnership Fund is a UKRI-backed innovation programme designed to strengthen local innovation systems and accelerate commercialisation. It enables regions to build stronger innovation partnerships, to identify our priority clusters of strength, to deliver portfolios of projects that can leverage national and private investment. We are really proud that Cardiff Capital Region has been chosen to partner with UKRI on the Local Innovation Partnership Fund. We've been working together with a newly formed innovation partnership. And the reason for my colleagues to the right representing academia, the public sector, but also the private sector, is the Local Innovation Partnership Fund looks to bring together that triple helix. But also within our region, we've gone further. So we want to ensure that the community, that the third sector is very much part of the design and the delivery of the Innovation Partnership Fund. We have spent the past 2 weeks out across our region. And Gavin, I think we're around 4,000 data entry points in terms of testing the conditions and the features for the very best innovation ecosystem that we can deliver in our region. So that gives us some prioritization. We are carrying out a significant data analysis, utilizing modern tools like artificial intelligence on 25,000 businesses across our region. And that will help us to define both the strength and the size of those clusters that we need to decide on. So one, maybe two clusters of focus. Being chosen as that delivery partner means that we need to put together a portfolio. And I think perhaps this is an opportunity to start a conversation with those of you not already engaged in that. So we have, or we will have, Amy, a website up and running tomorrow the day after. So if you just head to Cardiff Capital Region, you can engage in that conversation. Alternatively, LinkedIn is another great way to do that. The Innovation Partnership Fund is 30 million of UKRI funding, and that is going to be backed by 30 million of matched investment across the 5 years of the programme, with the aim that we meet an additional 30 million of follow-on investment. So you can see this is not an insignificant sum. This is a fantastic opportunity for our region. Activity needs to be aligned with the industrial strategy and UKRI priorities. But back to that pride. We are proud that this opportunity is here, that we have a direct relationship with UKRI, with the UK government, and we hope that this is the sign of a longer-term funding model for our region. But I'm going to come to some questions now, if that's okay. And Kelly, I'm going to start with you. Based on some of the things that I've just mentioned around Local Innovation Partnerships Fund, but also considering our focus on place-based innovation and the importance of that. So for you, Kelly, how does the Local Innovation Partnership Fund serve as an effective new tool for fostering place-based innovation in regions like Cardiff Capital Region, especially in light of that challenge around UK government's focus on smart specialisation and a push for us to focus on our local strengths and competitive advantage, so that discipline?
Okay, so let me tell you, and good afternoon, everybody, Prynhawn. So I'll start by just talking about why innovation-led growth is important to Cardiff Capital Region. Then I'll talk about the place-based aspect of that, and then I'll talk about the relationship with the Local Innovation Partnership Fund, because there's a bit of a story here, and I think that backdrop is important. So it started for us really back in about 2017 when CCR first secured a city deal. It was one of the biggest in the UK at the time, £1.3 billion. And about 780 million of that went straight away, we didn't see it, it went straight to Transport for Wales for delivery of the South East Wales Metro. Really important. But my contention, indeed the political contention at the time, was that whilst transport is a really important connector on many different levels, not just about moving people around, but bringing people together, we couldn't move people to the same low-paid, low-skilled jobs just much more efficiently. You know, we really had to think about how we increase productive capacity in our economy, because that was a real issue. And being a bit of an innovation geek, I've spent a lot of time looking over biannual innovation surveys, science and innovation audits, and it told us that whilst we have real strengths in Wales, in the capital region, we didn't have the stickiness, we didn't create enough of the right conditions to have an innovation system. So innovation-led growth became really important to us for that very reason. But the issue is innovation-led growth doesn't happen in isolation. It's not an abstract concept. It happens in places. So if you consider the context of Cardiff Capital Region, population of about 1.6 million, and we've got relative levels of prosperity and higher productivity and competitiveness along the M4 corridor. But you go 30, 40 miles north of here today, and you are amongst some of the poorest places in the UK, if not Northern Europe. So to make innovation-led growth work, it couldn't just stick to the M4 corridor. We had to think about how do we make it travel? What happens when you've got some of the most prosperous places, cheek by jowl with some of the least? So one of the things that we did early on was we thought about innovation, not just in terms of science and technology and what universities and big businesses did. We tried to embrace a much wider and richer definition of innovation. We thought about science and tech, of course, but also innovation in public services, because that's where we've got another significant productivity gap. We thought about the innovation needs of the everyday economy, food, tourism, care, hospitality, green industries. And we also thought about the relationship with civic society, so innovation was really grounded in local needs. Now, they've been really important concepts to us, I think, particularly because it shows that this is not zero-sum game. It's not just about, can this area have some of this and the rest can hope to magically feel the trickle-down benefits. So we've really had to get beyond that quite quickly. So what we've been trying to do, and particularly through examples like, it's not just the Local Innovation Partnership Fund, we've got an investment zone where we've got designs on things like innovation districts. So what we're really trying to do now, even though UK government has said, look, focus, you've got to stick to your strengths, and we get that, we fully appreciate why smart specialisation is important. You can't be all things to all people. You know, I go around the UK and I pick up all of these place-based strategies, and loads of them look the same. They could be cut and paste jobs. So you've got to have that granular level of differentiation. That's really important. But what we're trying to do now is to think much more about the quadruple helix. You know, the other voices that we need to make innovation work. Yes, we're trying to think about the discipline of sectors and clusters, and we've been doing that for many years. But it's about the intersect of some of those clusters, the interdisciplinarity that we need. I think it's also about things like supply chain development. I mean, if you take the sector that everybody talks about in relation to CCR, which is semiconductors, you know, 90% of the people working in that sector are within a 30-mile radius. There are 160 supply chain companies right across the capital region. In fact, one of the biggest companies is at the top of the Cunnon Valley. So we've been trying to actively promote how we invest in those supply chains. We've been trying to think about, yes, universities are important, Rick, always will be, but so are FE colleges. And guess what? FE colleges are in every part of our region, and they can be incredible agents for diffusion of knowledge and innovation. So we've been trying to think a bit more horizontally. How do we create new markets? How do we hear new voices? And research excellence is really important. We can't deny that. It's one of our key strengths. But we need to make sure innovation is focused on local needs, not just research-led needs. I think that's a really important concept. Not universally popular, but I think given the business model of universities, given the changes that we need to make, and for innovation to be more demand-led than just supply-driven, is a really important concept, and hopefully something we can really imbue in some of these new policy tools that we've secured, like the Local Innovation Partnership Fund. Do you want the mic?
It's okay. I'm happy for you to pass back and forth on that. So, Rick, I'd like to come to you next, if that's okay. I think Kel has just poked you a little bit with that. And no doubt there'll be a little bit of sparring involved in this one. But Rick, your research, more than most, has taken you around the world, focusing on innovation. I'm also keenly interested in the work that you've been doing with that deep dive into the UK city regions. Understanding that devolution looks different in each of the examples that you've studied. But could you please tell us a little bit about innovation ecosystem, critical success factors, the challenges and both opportunities that you see for Cardiff Capital Region? And I think we'll leave it there.
In 3 minutes, yeah. Thanks, Owen. Thanks for the invitation. So, yeah, the research we've done most recently has looked at Belfast, Cardiff, Manchester and Glasgow, looking at the quadruple helix that is informing efforts to generate economic growth and inclusive innovation, particularly an emphasis most recently on inclusive innovation. So you've got 4 cities of the UK there that have got some similarities and some differences, and I think that's the first point I'd make. We're talking about place-based innovation here, and that means that the specificities of each of these city regions is very important in thinking about policy and practice. So each of the regions has got what academics might describe as path-dependent patterns, historical patterns, institutional features, and that shapes the particular challenges and opportunities that they may have. So we need to think about those specificities when thinking through what are the opportunities and challenges for our particular region. One of the things that comes through quite clearly, and it does at first glance appear to be a little bit wishy-washy, but each of these regions, to varying degrees, has worked on developing a narrative that speaks to their past histories, but also frame some of their current understanding of their own identities. And I think that can be very important in exploring the particular positioning and the particular representation of the region more widely. And I think we're seeing the different city regions work on that to varying degrees. Thirdly, much more prosaic, but a very important point, data. Each of the regions will report to us that there is something of a lack of data of the appropriate level of granularity for them to understand some of the dynamics of innovation and economic development within their own region. And each of the 4 city regions is involved in generating some of their own data. But I think these are city deals and local innovation partnership funds, investment zones. These are UK-wide investments. So I think there's some more work that needs to be done at a UK level to ensure there's a consistent, coordinated, coherent set of data that are available for each of the city regions and each of the areas that are being mobilised and the UK level. I'll make 2 more points quickly. We're seeing some embracing of the need for novel structures and processes in the different actors within each of these regions. And Kelly's quite right to ask how well equipped universities are to play their role in this space at this point in time. Universities are extremely institutionally stable structures and organisations, shall we say. And so there is some work to be done, I think, across most, if not all, universities in the UK in terms of their capacity to join this collaborative effort. But they're also, I think, the base for quite a lot of valuable resource and potential assets there. Organisations like CCR have begun to experiment with catalysts, catalytic shock-bounded interventions into their innovation ecosystem to try and encourage greater innovation. Kelly mentioned public innovation being an example. And I think we're seeing that elsewhere, and I think that's important. I think it's also important to keep an eye on what some academics have termed the innovation commons. These are the raw materials of entrepreneurship and future innovation. And I think if we have too much of an emphasis on investing in winners, we'll have too few eggs in our basket and we won't be seeding the future innovation activity that we will need to. So, and my final point, if my good friend and colleague Kevin Morgan was here, he'd make this point about collaboration. I think the session starts with reference to collaboration. Collaboration is founded crucially on trust. And as Kev likes to say, trust is an example of an asset that has huge value but no price. You can't buy it. So we need the actors in the different regions of the UK to be investing time and resources in building the level of understanding, common language, shared enterprise to be able to deliver the potential of this more collaborative, place-based approach to innovation.
Thank you, Rick. I think I'll come back in a further question around that element of trust and collaboration, if that's okay. Louise, I am going to come to you next. I was teasing, sorry. I'd like to move on to perhaps talk about leadership and governance from your unique position at Tramshed Tech. So the success of place-based innovation often depends on that leadership and the models that empower participation rather than kind of control it and hold it. From your experience, what changes in leadership culture or governance are needed to better support diverse innovators across our region and across the whole of the UK, I suppose, to really bring people from those different communities that I and others have talked about to feel genuinely, I suppose, included and empowered in shaping their own place?
I think that is probably one of the most central questions that we need to be addressing. To pick up on Rick's point about, what is unique to us, what are we going to push forward as our narrative in Wales? I think one of the things that we most definitely should be pushing forward is our capacity to include. I think we're the only nation in the world to have a Future Generations Act, Future Generations Commissioner. I say now we're not the only because Future Generations Commissioner, we're lucky enough to host that team in Grangetown. And there is a revolving door of countries from around the world that come in on probably a weekly basis. I can see some of my team will be able to explain some of these visits to you, but we get visits from all around the globe asking to learn from Wales and learn from the things that we're doing in terms of inclusivity. So I think the starting point is inclusivity and diversity is something we're really good at. We should most definitely be building on. I've seen some absolutely fantastic initiatives over the last couple of years, probably post-COVID actually, where people have started to realise with the growth of tech as a horizontal, that we're a lesser nation if we allow a very small group of people to build and develop the technology that we use. So I've spent this morning talking with colleagues and with government around, the risks to Wales, the risks to the UK of our AI large language models being built all outside of Europe, being built in the US. What does that really mean for us as a nation in terms of the culture that we hold so dear, no less our language, being a bilingual nation. But I've seen some things that do give me hope. So, it is concerning that we're going down this route of, these large language models, which are controlled by the big four, I think. But it's just great to see what communities are leading on. So I'm not sure if there's any colleagues in the room from the Barclays Eagle Labs, but just to be able to see the diverse founders network that's grown here in Wales. And the key to the leadership of those types of networks is to allow the community to develop itself. So what Barclays Eagle Labs have done in that instance is they've provided the space and the resource and the branding in order to bring those people together. And then they've stepped back and they've said, well, this is your community. You're the founders. You should really push forward with what you want to see here. And that's what then makes that sustainable. Because it isn't, how many times have people in this room tried to organise something with all the best intentions of bringing people together, and the minute you step away from it, it stops. And I think we've got to get away from that. We need sustainable communities which are very much driven by the leaders within those communities. I've also seen some fantastic work. I sit on the UK government's Invest in Women task force, and Wales is very much leading in some of the work to get women into tech, women into STEM. Unfortunately, post-COVID, we saw a small uptick in women going into STEM roles. And sadly, the last set of results that we've been looking at for 2024 have shown we're back on the decline again. So some of the community work that's going on actually led not just with the universities, but with the communities themselves to bring women together to really think about how we can sustain that work. Sometimes I get a bit disheartened, Owen, because I feel like we're probably doing more than ever, but does it feel that we're getting the results that we really need to see? And I kind of have to give myself a bit of a shake then and say, no, we've got to keep pressing forward. And if anyone can be an inclusive environment for innovation, it's Wales.
Thank you, Louise. Kelly, I wonder if we could talk, I suppose, drawing on my experience, my research, looking at many UK city regions, we seem to struggle to translate even high-level strategy into tangible community-level impact. Could I just pose a question to you around how Cardiff Capital Region is ensuring its investments, whether that's in infrastructure, skills, innovation clusters, create those visible kind of inclusive benefits across communities? Again, not just in those established urban centres.
Well, if I knew the answer to that, I think, yeah, absolutely, yeah, holy grail stuff really, isn't it? Yeah, I think in our position, and, you know, bear in mind, I work for 10 local authority leaders and then 2 government ministers. So, you know, very quickly in our establishment, we had to get over this question, you know, what's in it for us? We had to stop with the zero-sum thinking. It had to be about a positive-sum game. So what we did was really pragmatic, to be honest. We took our city deal, which was the first investment fund that we had, and what we said is, look, we've just got to take this question off the table. What have the Romans ever done for us? And we used half of our investment fund to do stuff everywhere. You know, every single place had a Metro Plus scheme, access to the housing fund, access to skills, digital connectivity, just the basics, hygiene factors, you know, ULEV, charging stations, you name it. Then what that gave us the purchase to do then was to take the rest of the investment fund and invest it, you know, to look at debt and equity instruments, to think about how we could get our money back. Because if we could get our money back, we could seed the next proposition, and we did. We went and seeded 2 Strength in Places bids from UK government, 100 million. People like Tracy helped to secure things like place-based impact accelerators, then the investment zone, then the local innovation partnership fund. So what we've been able to do is to show that we've had impact everywhere, but some of our investments have to be more targeted, but they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both things at the same time. And it's an absolute myth that some of our investment funds, again, have gone to the areas where you'd expect, urban areas where we've got universities. Things like our Strategic Premises Fund, which CBRE run for us, you know, has done more investments, I think, in the Northern Valleys than along the M4 corridor. The last investment we made through Innovation Investment Capital, which is run for us by PwC and Capricorn Investment Partners, was in Ystrad Mynach in Caerphilly. So, you know, we've gone to extensive efforts to get out into every community, you know, to run our Unleash road shows, to talk to local businesses, to find where the innovation is that we can invest in. And then by doing that then, we've learned about the supply network and how we invest in that, how we focus our clusters at that. So over time, tied into our approach with FE colleges, some of the skills interventions, I think it's built up a picture. If you look at a map of Cardiff Capital Region now and our investments, you'll see flags all over the place. Where it gets really difficult is where you've got a government mandate to deliver an investment zone that's just Newport and Cardiff, or a local innovation partnership fund, which if you stick to some of the strict guidance would lead you to believe this is about universities and where are our universities. So I think it's trying to sort of reposition the argument all of the time about what strengths are, what are the different capitals that we have in our community. They're not just economic and financial, they're physical, they're human, they're skills-based, you know, they're community animation. And whilst by no means are we perfect, and there's loads more we can do, and we get things wrong all of the time, I think that is the strategy that's good, and we're going to stick to it. It doesn't please everyone, because I get tapped on the shoulder all of the time, and why aren't you doing this, and what about more of that? And I think 2 things for us in the capital region. One, we've got to have the discipline of sticking to a plan, not changing things every 5 minutes because somebody else shouts. And the second thing, I think in an environment where there's loads of noise at the moment, isn't there? You know, you could be really depressed just listening to the news. Distinguish the signals from the noise. And I think our competitive advantage could be clarity, being really clear about what we can do and what we're good enough to do.
Thank you very much. Louise, I'm going to come back to you if that's okay. So Tramshed Tech has become a key connector across our local innovation ecosystem. How do you see those innovation hubs acting as catalysts for place-based collaboration, particularly, I suppose, reflectively when traditional institutions can be slower to adapt and meet those needs?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because when you look around, we often get compared, don't we, in the city region to other developed regions around the globe. So, if you go and visit Brainport over in Eindhoven or Station F in Paris, or you see John was at the back earlier, you go to Dogpatch Labs in Dublin, all of those organisations and ecosystems have similar building blocks, if you like. But But one of the challenges that we've got is we have started to put some of those building blocks together in our tech ecosystem in Cardiff Capital Region, but actually across most of the UK, the wider ecosystem is extremely fragmented. So if I'm a founder and I'm looking to start a business, two things can happen to me really. One, I can be quite super connected and I might know people already. I know which doors to go through. I know who to tap up. I know who to ring. I also know where the pots of funding are. So where the institutional money is, where the investors are. And actually I can start a business and start to scale it quite successfully. Or I can be a founder that has a fantastic idea, perhaps is a spin out coming out of a university. And actually I'm quite isolated. I don't have the contacts. We've got a fantastic story come out of Tramshed, which is a young lad who built an AI gaming company in his mum's back bedroom in Carmarthen. You can't probably get much more isolated than that, waking up every morning and your mum saying, what are you doing up there? And he says, I'm building a multi-million pound, if not billion pound company. And that's where the role of the innovation hubs come in. Because in order to be able to start a business, most of the things that you need are pretty self-explanatory. You could do a good ChatGPT search and find out, how do I constitute a business? How do I start a business? What does my roadmap look like? But if you want to scale that business, you need good friends. You need good people around you. You actually need to be around people that have just scaled a business. Because it's like anything, if you do a degree, the best person to talk you through doing your degree is someone who's just completed that degree. And we don't recognize that enough and support that enough. So I think the innovation hubs are really important to bring people together. The ambassador from Sweden is here today, and the big question I've got for Sweden is, how have they ended up as the European country with the most amount of unicorns when Wales hasn't had one yet? But when I think about their ecosystem, it's highly connected through innovation hubs. And that's one of the reasons why they have such a high density, not just of unicorns, but of high growth businesses. And that's what we need to see much more of in our ecosystem.
Thank you, Louise. Rick, I'm going to come to you next, and then just a heads up, I will offer the opportunity for anyone who has questions, comments, even allergic reactions. Happy to take all three. But Rick, I think you probably teed this up earlier, and one of the things that you've always spoken to me about is, creating innovation-led growth requires long-term partnerships. You talked about the trust earlier, and those long-term partnerships need to be across sectors. So perhaps you could delve into that experience for us again around maybe delivering initiatives such as the Spark Innovation Campus. What have you learned from building those effective trust-based collaborations, and how would you advise the rest of us on delivering the same?
Thanks, Lou. So I think Lou's just touched on this as well. We need to think about whether we have the physical spaces and the institutional arrangements in place to facilitate the engagement with a wider variety of actors, and whether we've got the roles in place to curate and support the networks of those different actors. Because if we don't bring people together in ways that they're not currently used to engaging, we won't have the platform for the conversations through which a sense of shared enterprise can be developed. And what I think is very important to make explicit, I'm not presuming anything about people in this room, But when I talk about collaboration and shared enterprise, that doesn't mean that everybody joining a partnership or a collaboration is trying to achieve the same things. We've got to be realistic about why actors, whether that's individuals or organisations, participate. They're participating because they see some opportunity for payback which meets their own interests. And that can be achieved through a careful curation of that shared sense of participation. But it does also require something about the initial engagement. And I won't lapse into academic talk, but there are labels for this. We need to move back what actually I think Kel references before. We need to move beyond an instrumental, self-interested form of engagement with a zero-sum game in mind to one that sees some sort of mutual reciprocity and commitment to some shared set of goals, which all of us can see something to benefit our constituents and our own interests. And that requires, I think, some new thinking, some physical spaces, some new roles. I mean, in that context, we coined the term micro-missions to describe how the missions approach, which has been getting a lot of traction, a lot of talk about a missions approach, including with UK government, as you'll have seen, but those conversations often take place at a level that is well removed from the realities of the people that would need to see themselves in any kind of agenda like that. So we think a micro-missions approach that can bring together conversations amongst local actors to shape their own agenda within that vehicle of being innovative with locally focused objectives is a way of meeting these different levels. Because Lou's actually absolutely right then. We also want to think about how we scale from whatever can be achieved very locally. And that's the other side of the coin here. You can, if you get out into the communities to try and support activity that can make things better, you also want to be able to try and scale that. But each case will be different. So it's not an easy task.
Can I ask a quick question about that? On that, Rick, I think what you're saying is spot on. But from the private sector perspective, often what a private sector partner might want from a triple or quadruple helix relationship is money. And I think we kind of put the message back to private sector that commercialization is a bit of a dirty word, like we shouldn't necessarily be focused on that, where actually those businesses need to generate money in order to be able to stay in the game. How do we get better at that?
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, yes. So this is where time and conceptions of time is very important, okay? So a lot of commercial organisations are, or certainly think they're working in very, very tight, immediate timescales. And that's fine, but that can limit the capacity for more patient, longer term, ultimately more productive at scale outcomes. So I think it's a combination of making explicit the timescales people want and need to act at, and different pathways to, in this case, commercial opportunity and commercial benefit. We know full well, there's plenty of research on this, that very short-term thinking in business is very, very harmful to the longer-term success of those businesses. But I entirely appreciate that at the same time, many businesses face a lot of very short-term challenges. So the conversation needs to map out what needs to be achieved in the very short term, but not in ways that diminish the prospects of building something that's more sustainable and more beneficial for the business and for beyond that business, because that's where real commercial opportunity lies.
I was just going to say, though, I think this is where the triple helix model has real limitations. We think about universities spinning out businesses as if it's about technology transfer. It's not. It's about a fundamentally different business model, and commercialisation is the byproduct of that model. And I think we've got the opportunity to do that now through the Local Innovation Partnership Fund. And I'm not saying technology transfer isn't important, but it doesn't happen in isolation as a transactional process. The model is messy, it's difficult, it's challenging, and I don't think we've quite got our heads around that at the minute. Sorry, we just
one very last thing on that. I think when we talk about getting the funding, the resource, the skills and training out across the whole region and getting it, you know, not just into the hands of the early adopters or the places where we would usually expect to see it. A really important thing is that when we bring partners to the table to innovate, we don't rely on very small SMEs. Perhaps sometimes it can be just like a student that's come out of the university, he's got some IP, he's got an idea. They then work with the public sector, they build that idea up, they come up with solutions, and then it goes out to tender. And when it goes out to tender, there is no way in the world that person can ever win that commercial opportunity. And then we're back to, you know, the big four coming in and winning that work again. So, yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. I lost control completely then, but we're back. I promised just to pause and give you the opportunity if you've got any questions before we conclude. We've just got a mic coming from the back for you now, sir.
Thank you. Hi there. My name's Daly. I'm from Cardiff originally. After many years away working in startups, the ecosystem in London and abroad, I moved back last year. And so I've been spending a lot of time trying to understand what's going on in the innovation space and the startup space explicitly. And one of the things that's consistently played back to me by the people that I'm speaking with and learning from is a sense of frustration and limitation that stems from a perception of the extent to which things are fragmented in Cardiff region, Wales more broadly. And I just wondered if I could hear from you guys, firstly, to what extent is that something that you recognize and are experiencing? And if that is the case, like, where do we go? So, you know, that fragmentation, for example, seems to be showing up on the funding side, on the strategy side, and also perhaps in sort of conflict within and across organizations that are, at least on paper, supposed to be doing a similar thing in terms of enabling innovation in the region.
Do you know what? I blame devolution. And I don't mean at a Welsh government level. I mean, we've got 4 regions in Wales now, and we're trying to act like the mayoral combined authorities. And yet you've got national funding organisations, institutions, programmes, and you've got them at the regional level, then you've got them at the local level. You've got funds sat here, there, you've got British Business Bank, National Wealth Fund, Cardiff Capital Region, Development Bank Wales. There is no single front door. And I think my experience is if you go into one of the strategic combined authorities, there has to be coherence because you've had to really think about what works at that level of place. I don't think we've got that coherence yet. I think it's a huge opportunity. But at the minute, I don't think we've defined those spatial territories in the right way. There's a lot of sharp elbows and jostling, and I think this really is the challenge for us over the next few years. Can we really think with real coherence and clarity about how we align these things? Because there could be massive leverage opportunities. If I think now about the new local growth fund arrangements coming in Wales, again, you know, that's likely to be, again, a very fragmented way of distributing funds. How do you get the most out of it if it isn't aligned with city deal funds or what Development Bank of Wales is doing? So I keep wishing there's somebody somewhere with a blank sheet of paper who's thinking, right, how do we coordinate all of this? But I do think that is the absolute challenge that we have to grapple with. I find it difficult, and I understand the system. So I dread to think what it must feel like for somebody coming in and looking at this anew. I absolutely couldn't agree more. Why did you come back to
It's a very good question. Initially due to COVID, so it was not a plan, but I was one of the many people that left London. I thought I'd be at home for sort of 3 months until COVID passed, but 18 months later I was still here. Then after a stint abroad, I decided to come back to Cardiff instead of London. But I see so much opportunity here and potential here that I wasn't really aware existed until moving back. But it seems that it's scattergun. It's kind of pointing in lots of different directions, and so I have a sense that, or forming a sense that there's a missed opportunity to develop a sort of critical mass, sort of an escape velocity where we then really start seeing success that snowballs at scale.
Yeah, we'll come and speak to you because I don't think it's a missed opportunity. I think it's an opportunity that we're facing right now. So when you look at other ecosystems around Europe, they all reach a maturity level where all of a sudden we stop talking about fragmentation, we stop talking about ecosystem building, and it's just there, and it's happening, and it's working. So I don't think it's a missed opportunity. I think it's an opportunity that we need to be grabbing right now. What massively encourages me is to hear Kelly say today, you know, we got to get brave about this. We've got to have one version of the truth. We've got to stick to that version of the truth. And then we need to make sure everyone in the room knows what that North Star is that we're heading towards. So most definitely not a missed opportunity. I'd hate you to leave the room thinking that, but welcome home. Great that you're here to help us grab the opportunity with both hands.
Thank you. I am conscious we are at time. I would like you to join me in a big round of applause for our panel, please. First and foremost, Kelly, Louise and Rick. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us around place-based innovation. If anything has created an idea or a need for a conversation, we will hang about a little bit after. But like I said to you, head to the Cardiff Capital Region website, check out Tramshed Tech. And yeah, hopefully it's the start. Sorry?
Don't forget Rick. He sold Japanese trainers on.
And if anyone wants to talk to Rick, it's the Heathcock, I believe it is, in Cardiff. Thank you all very much for your time. Diolch.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Owen, very much indeed, and to Louise and to Kelly, dear friends, and thank you to Rick. The next thing that will be happening in here at 3:15 will be the opportunity for high-value manufacturing and the free ports here in Wales. So I'd encourage you to come back at 3:15. And in the meantime, thank you to this current panel for their place-based innovation inspiration. Thank you very much indeed.